The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic, and for a moment it made me smile. I'd spent the whole afternoon planning a surprise. His favorite dinner, wine breathing on the counter, candles ready to light. Mark had worked hard for that promotion, and tonight was supposed to be about him. I even bought dessert, the kind he always pretends not to want but finishes anyway. I was excited. Stupidly excited, really. So I picked up the phone to call him, just to let a little of the surprise slip. But before I could say much, he cut me off. "I won't make it tonight," he said flatly. "We've got a strategy meeting with the directors. Big stuff. I'll be home late." Just like that. No apology, no pause to hear the disappointment in my voice. I stood there, phone still in hand, listening to the silence that followed. My chest tightened. Still, I swallowed it down. I told him I understood. What else could I say? So I blew out the candles, packed away the dinner, poured myself a glass of wine and traded the celebration for something quieter. A robe, a face mask, maybe a long soak in the tub. I told myself it was fine, that these things happen. I even tried to laugh about it. But when I finally sat down with the remote in my hand, flipping through channels for noise more than entertainment, something strange happened. And I still remember the exact second my fingers froze. It was one of those light, fluffy segments, local news covering a luxury restaurant's couples night. You know the type. Smiling hosts, soft music, slow pans of champagne glasses, and candlelit tables. I almost skipped past it. Almost. But then the camera caught something. Someone. A flash of a familiar face, angled just enough to be unmistakable. My heart stuttered. I blinked. Rewound. And there he was. Mark, my husband. At the restaurant, I wasn't good enough to celebrate with him at tonight. He wasn't alone. Sitting next to him, practically glued to his side, was a woman I'd seen before. Tall, elegant, perfect posture, his boss. The same one I'd met once at a holiday party, the one who never looked me in the eye. They were laughing. She touched his arm like she owned it. And Mark? He looked happy, relaxed, like the man who just told me he was stuck in some corporate war room had somehow wandered into a 5-star dream date instead. I just sat there, not angry, not even hurt. Numb, maybe. My wine untouched, my robe warm around my shoulders, and the only sound in the room was the hum of the television. I watched the screen again, rewound, slowed it down, watched the moment his eyes flicked toward the camera, and he instinctively turned away. He knew. He knew he shouldn't be there. And yet, he was. So I did what any heartbroken woman with a remote and decent Wi-Fi would do. I pressed record, just like that. My fingers didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. It felt mechanical, like muscle memory, like some part of me had already been expecting this day to come. I watched the screen one more time, making sure the clip saved properly. There they were, laughing, leaning in close, the glint of wine glasses between them. It wasn't just betrayal. It was public. It was televised. And worst of all, he looked proud to be there. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat back on the couch and let the silence grow around me. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from a clarity so sharp it cuts through every excuse you've ever made for someone. I thought about the dinner still cooling in the fridge, the hours I spent trying to make the evening special, and I thought about how easily he chose someone else over that, over me. But I wasn't going to confront him, not tonight, not with wine in my system and heartbreak fresh in my chest. No, I had something better. Proof. A quiet plan starting to form. He had no idea I'd seen it, and that gave me something unexpected. Power. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was crying or pacing or losing my mind, but because I was thinking, carefully, quietly. When the sun came up, I brewed my coffee like always, fed the cat, opened the fridge and stared at the untouched dinner I'd made. Then, like nothing had happened, I laid it out on plates, warmed it gently, and set the table again. He never knew I had seen anything. And that was exactly the point. I changed into soft pajamas, his favorite ones, The ones he once said made me look like comfort itself. I lit the candles again, not for romance this time, but for atmosphere. Everything in that house looked gentle, calm, welcoming, like a woman still waiting for her husband to come home from a long day at work. I made sure of it. I needed him relaxed, unaware. I needed him to walk into a dream before he realized it was all about to break. When he finally walked through the door, it was like nothing had happened. His tie was loose, his sleeves rolled up, and he wore that tired little smirk that used to make me feel chosen. "Long day," he said, setting down his keys. I smiled. Sweetly. The way I always did. "You must be starving," I told him. "I saved dinner." He kissed my cheek like a stranger, sat down like a king, and I watched him eat, like a woman studying her last illusion. He ate like everything was normal. Told me about strategy meetings and budget realignments, throwing in just enough jargon to sound convincing. I nodded, asked the right questions, even offered up that gentle laugh he used to love. Every part of me played the role, graceful, warm, supportive. But inside, I was peeling him apart, watching how easily the lies slipped from his mouth, how little effort it took him to erase her from his version of the night. I leaned forward, rested my chin on my hand like I was mesmerized by him. "Did everything go the way you hoped?" I asked as I refilled his wine. He smiled, smug. "Even better. We're probably ahead of schedule now." I almost laughed. We. He and his boss, I imagined. Ahead of schedule for what? His personal collapse? His professional one? I sipped my own wine and let him talk. Let him believe he was in control. Let him enjoy the comfort I'd laid out like bait. And when the plates were cleared, when the food had settled and he leaned back like a man well-fed and well-loved, I stood up slowly, walked to the living room. "Come sit with me," I said. "There's something I want to show you, something I recorded." I smiled like it was a gift, like I had captured a funny clip or a heartwarming scene. And he followed, unsuspecting. Just a man walking into the softest ambush he'd never see coming. He dropped onto the couch with a little sigh, swirling the last of his wine, completely at ease. I picked up the remote and scrolled through the recordings. "I saw this on TV last night," I said casually. "Thought it might interest you." His eyes flicked to the screen as the news segment began. Soft piano music, polished anchors, shots of a glittering restaurant. At first he didn't flinch, just kept sipping, one arm draped lazily across the back of the couch. I stayed quiet, watching his profile, not the screen. His fingers tightened slightly around the glass. The corners of his mouth twitched. On screen, the footage moved slowly. Couples walking in, flashes of smiles, clinking glasses. And then, the moment. The camera found them. Him. Her. Mark's breath caught before he could mask it, but I didn't look at him. I just leaned back and took another sip of wine. Calm. Effortless. Like I wasn't watching my own marriage unravel frame by frame. He turned his head toward me, but I didn't return the look. "So," I said gently, as if asking about the weather, "how was the strategy meeting?" I smiled as I asked it. Sweet, warm, unbothered, like the question didn't already have an answer. Like I hadn't already seen every lie he was about to tell. I didn't pause the video. I didn't lower the volume. I just sat there as the footage rolled on, unbothered, like I was watching someone else's life crack open on screen. The camera panned across the candlelit tables, the sparkling wine, the couples nestled into each other like they had nothing to hide. And then, there they were again. Mark and his boss, arms linked, faces close, smiling like no one else in the world mattered, like I didn't exist. He tensed beside me. Not a word, not a breath. Just the slow, creeping awareness that his world was shifting, and I wasn't the one shaking. I kept my eyes on the screen, my voice steady. "It's a beautiful place," I murmured. "Looks romantic." I let that word linger in the air like smoke. He didn't respond. Couldn't. And in that silence, I felt something settle deep inside me. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. Cold, polished, final. The video kept playing. The waiter pouring champagne, her fingers brushing his sleeve. His head tilted slightly toward her, close enough to kiss. It was all there. Public, broadcasted, undeniable. And all I had to do was press play. He was squirming now, his body leaning forward like maybe he could escape it, as if distance from the screen could undo what had already happened. But it was too late. He wasn't just caught. He was recorded. He finally turned to me, his mouth opening like he might try to explain. I didn't let him. I looked him straight in the eyes, calm, steady, maybe even a little amused, and asked, "So, who planned your strategy tonight? You or your boss's tongue?" His face drained. That soft shade of guilt mixed with panic. It showed in his jaw, his twitching fingers, the way his knee started bouncing like a lie he couldn't control. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the way he'd kissed my cheek hours earlier like everything was fine. The way he sat at our table, eating the food I had made, lying without a single crack in his voice. And now? Now he couldn't form a sentence, couldn't even look at the screen. I watched him as he watched himself, watched the mask he wore begin to crumble under the weight of what he knew I knew. He reached for the remote like he could stop the moment from existing. I took it before he could touch it. "Don't," I said, still quiet. "You should see how you look when you lie to your wife on camera." The words didn't come from rage. They came from something deeper, something still, controlled, razor sharp. I wanted him to feel every second of it, not the betrayal. The exposure, the helplessness of being seen. He started stammering, something about it not meaning anything, about it being a work dinner, how he was just trying to keep things professional. I tilted my head, watching him squirm, trying to patch a hole in a boat that had already sunk. His words fell apart as fast as they left his mouth. It wasn't the affair that stunned me anymore. It was how sloppy he was at pretending it wasn't one. As if I hadn't already memorized the way he lies when he's cornered. Still, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse or demand. I just stood up slowly and turned off the TV. "You looked happy," I said softly, like I was talking about someone I used to know. "Like I haven't seen you smile in a long time." That landed. He opened his mouth to say something, maybe to deny it, maybe to beg, but I didn't wait. I walked to the kitchen, picked up the wine bottle, and poured myself another glass with hands that didn't shake. And as he sat there in silence, the room colder now, smaller somehow, I thought of everything I had left to say. Not to him, to myself, to the version of me that used to make excuses for moments like this, the one who thought love meant forgiving everything. That version? She had just disappeared. He followed me into the kitchen like a man waking up inside his own nightmare. "Nina, wait, just let me explain," he said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back, not angrily, just enough to make space. "You cheated on me," I said quietly, and then looked me in the eyes to lie about it, on the night I was cooking for you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Every word landed like stone on glass. I watched him blink at the sound of his own actions spoken aloud. He tried again, said something about being drunk, about the stress of the promotion, how it just happened. He fumbled with timelines, like the right combination of excuses might undo what I'd seen. But I wasn't listening for the details. I was watching his face, the way it contorted, searching for the version of himself he thought I still believed in. I didn't. That man was gone. Maybe he never existed the way I hoped he did. I turned and opened the drawer. Not dramatically, just like I would if I were reaching for a napkin. Instead, I pulled out a folder. Clean. Precise. I placed it on the counter in front of him. Inside, divorce papers, a USB copy of the video, and a note. Short, clear, final. I watched him freeze as he flipped through it. No screaming, no tears. Just the weight of consequences finally landing where they belonged. He looked up at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing there. And maybe he didn't. Maybe he thought I'd crumble, the way I had during smaller betrayals, missed calls, forgotten anniversaries, half-truths I convinced myself were harmless. But this time was different. I wasn't asking questions. I wasn't trying to make sense of it. I was finished handing out grace to someone who kept turning it into rope. He stuttered something about making a mistake, about how he never meant to hurt me. The words sounded cheap, like lines from a script he barely believed himself. I remember standing there feeling strangely detached, like I was watching someone else's husband beg for something he already threw away. He said he loved me. I didn't respond. Love doesn't look like what I saw on that screen, and it sure as hell doesn't look like this. I picked up my glass of wine again, took a sip, and walked toward the door. He called after me, his voice cracking, but I didn't turn around. I hope the promotion was worth it, I said, hand on the doorknob. Because tonight, you lost everything else. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I walked into the night like I'd just closed the final page of a book I should have stopped reading chapters ago. I got into the car and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, heart not racing the way I thought it would. There was no chaos inside me, just a clean, open silence, like my body finally had space to breathe. I looked at the house, our house, glowing gently behind the curtains. So many memories lived inside those walls, but suddenly they felt like someone else's, someone I didn't owe anything to anymore. I drove, not far. Just enough to put a stretch of quiet road between me and the version of myself that once waited by that door. My phone buzzed once, then again. I didn't look. He could keep his explanations, his apologies, his panic. I wasn't interested in any of it. What he broke wasn't just trust. It was the story we'd built, the one I'd clung to like it still had pages left worth reading. He burned it. I simply walked away from the ashes. When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, I exhaled. Not because I was exhausted, but because I was ready. Ready to sleep. Ready to think. Ready to begin again. Tomorrow, the rest of it would start. The logistics, the fallout, the reshaping of my life. But tonight belonged to me. And as I stepped into the lobby, I realized something. I hadn't escaped. I had chosen freedom. The email was anonymous, just a clean subject line, no signature, but it was enough. The video clip made its way to the right inboxes: HR, executive leadership, a few board members. I didn't need to write a message. The footage spoke for itself. Mark, arm in arm with his superior, on a night he claimed to be locked in a meeting. It wasn't just scandal, it was policy violation. Professional misconduct, ethics breach. Their smirks turned into whispers behind closed doors. I didn't watch the fallout in real time. I had no interest in playing spectator to his downfall. But word got back to me, as it always does. The promotion? Frozen. Under review. Questions started circling. Some whispered, some loud. The boss, his date, suddenly on administrative leave. A formal investigation launched. Mark showed up to work with tired eyes and no wedding ring. People noticed. People always notice when the story changes that quickly. Meanwhile, I moved out, quietly, with help. No dramatic scenes, no emotional speeches. I left a home, not a life. My lawyer handled the rest, and I didn't need to lift a finger beyond signing my name. I started over in a small apartment filled with light, clean walls, fresh sheets, no ghosts. I bought new mugs, lit new candles, rearranged my mornings the way I liked them. It was strange at first, being alone. But then again, I'd felt alone for a long time. I had just stopped admitting it. People started reaching out. Friends, acquaintances, even women I barely knew. I saw the clip, some whispered. You handled it with such grace, others said. But what struck me most weren't the compliments. It was the relief in their voices. Like my story had given them permission to see their own differently. Like someone had finally done what they'd only dared to imagine, walked away with her head high and her proof intact. I didn't rush to tell the world what happened, but when I was ready, I did share my story. Not with bitterness, not for revenge, but for clarity. I spoke about betrayal, yes, but also about self-respect, about listening to the gut feeling we too often quiet. I told the truth gently, plainly, And somehow it echoed louder than any scream. People listened. Women reached out. My inbox became a confessional. My strength, it seemed, had become contagious. And through it all, I kept my life simple. Mornings with coffee on the balcony, walks without checking my phone, laughter that didn't feel forced. There was no grand transformation, no dramatic makeover, just peace. A kind of peace I hadn't realized I was starving for. And every time someone asked how I stayed so calm, I said the same thing. I didn't stay calm. I became calm. There's a difference. I never saw him again. Not in person, anyway. But occasionally, I'd hear whispers. His career stalled, the investigation still hanging over his head like a shadow. No more polished LinkedIn updates. No more smug photos at conferences. He had become smaller somehow. Quieter. A man who had once filled rooms with his presence now walked carefully through his own reputation. And me? I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to haunt him. Life was doing that on its own. One night, I sat on my new couch, a cup of tea in hand, the TV off. No noise, no drama, just stillness. It was strange at first, being in a space that didn't echo with someone else's footsteps. But that night, it felt right. I looked around at the life I'd rebuilt. Not glamorous, not perfect, but mine. Entirely mine. And I realized I hadn't just survived what happened. I had rewritten it, reclaimed it, not with fire, but with clarity. He made the news. I made history.